Here is a city of 83,000 people on a small peninsula at the northern tip of Africa. It belongs to Spain. Everything around it is Morocco. It is ringed by one of the most fortified borders on Earth. In the last 2 days of July, up to 60,000 people walked, ran, and above all, swam into it, around the breakwater where the fence meets the sea. 60,000 is the Prime Minister's own figure. 57 people did not make it. Some drowned, some were crushed against the rocks. The army moved in. Reception centers for children traveling alone hit 1,600% of capacity. Every news channel will tell you that story. Here's the stranger one. A month earlier, Spain's Supreme Court read one sentence of one law exactly as written and concluded that people who arrive by water fall outside the fast return rule because they never touch the fence. Then a distorted, too good to be true version of that ruling traveled through smugglers' social media faster than any official correction could. The city is Ceuta, one of 2 Spanish enclaves on this coast. 60,000 people did not storm its fence. They walked around a sentence. Today, how a border really runs on 3 things: a statute, an information channel, and a rental agreement. And what happened when all 3 failed in the same week. Here is the sequence to the hour we recorded this. June 29th, Spain's Supreme Court, after 2 lower courts in Ceuta and Andalusia, reached the same conclusion: rules that migrants who arrive by swimming do not cross a border containment element. That phrase matters. Under Spain's aliens law, crossing the physical barrier is the legal trigger for on-the-spot returns. No fence contact, no fast return. Instead, an individual case file with time and process attached. Within weeks, migrants interviewed by Reuters described posts on Instagram and other platforms claiming a Spanish court had decided that anyone arriving by sea could not be deported. That is not what the ruling says. It grants a procedure, not a right to stay. The Prime Minister himself blamed trafficking networks for spreading the distorted version. July 30th, Thursday morning, 2,000 to 3,000 people crossed in the first hours, most by water. By Friday, the Interior Ministry counts roughly 50,000 entries. The Prime Minister says 60. More than 48,000 are returned to Morocco within a day and a half, not under the fence rule the court had just read, but under a separate, older country-to-country return deal. The gap in the statute was real. The promise built on it was not, and the people who believed it paid its price. The confirmed deaths climbed through Friday from 18 to 34 to 57. By Saturday, hundreds were attempting the same at Melilla, Spain's other enclave. Now let's go upstream, 3 layers deep. Start with the sentence itself. A decade ago, Spain wrote a special rule for exactly these 2 cities. People caught crossing the border barrier can be handed back on the spot. No case file, no hearing at the fence. The wording ties that power to a physical object, the containment structure. When it was written, that seemed like precision. The fence was the border was the fence. Then 3 courts in a row read it the way courts must, as written. A person who swims around the breakwater never crosses the containment element. So the fast return power written for this exact beach does not apply on the wet half of it. Same city, same hour, 2 legal universes. Climb the wire and you can be back in Morocco in minutes. Swim past it and you are owed an individual file. Notice the shape of the defect because it is not Spanish and not new. The rule watches an object instead of a purpose. The moment a law defines its trigger as a piece of infrastructure, every path around that infrastructure exits the law. The courts did not open a gap. They read out loud the gap that had been written in from day one. And to be fair to the judges, the ruling did not abolish returns. It said, for this route, follow the ordinary process. The gap between minutes and process is where everything that follows lives. Now watch what turned a legal footnote into 60,000 people in the water. The ruling grants a procedure. The version that traveled grants paradise. Arrive by sea and they cannot deport you. If the Prime Minister is right about who spread that version, the motive is simple. The loudest repackagers sell crossings for a living, and a nuance deleted is a ticket sold. A second law fed the same rumor. In April, Spain opened an extraordinary regularization. Potentially, 500,000 people already living in the country without papers could apply for residence, and pending expulsion files for applicants were shelved. Read the fine print, and it excludes new arrivals entirely. Only people in Spain before this year qualify. But fine print does not travel. What traveled was Spain is legalizing everyone and no longer returns anyone. Two true documents, one false promise, assembled from both. Here is the structural part. The state publishes rulings in legal bulletins at bulletin speed in legal language. The smuggling networks publish them in reels the same day in the languages of the route with a call to action. There is no institution on the state side whose job is to deliver the accurate version at the same speed to the same phones. The information channel about the law is owned by the people with a financial interest in distorting it. And the asymmetry lands where it always lands. 57 people paid the maximum price for a claim that was never true, and most of the rest were returned within days. The publishers of the false version collected their fees either way. One question remains: why could crowds reach the water at all? Because on an ordinary day, the first line of this border is not Spanish. It is Moroccan police and patrols on the far side, a service Europe pays for openly. Over 200 million euros for border security since 2001, 140 million in one package after the last spike. Morocco is the template, not the exception. Turkey was promised 6 billion to hold the Syrian route. Libya's Coast Guard runs on European money and training. That arrangement has a known property. It is politically conditional. In 2021, after a diplomatic insult, 8,000 people reached this same city in 2 days. This time, analysts pointed to Spain's warming with Algeria, Morocco's rival. Reports suggested border control had loosened. Morocco has stayed silent, and Spain itself has officially denied that the crisis was staged. We hold to what is documented. The paid checkpoint usually stops these journeys early. This week, it did not. And the contract behind it has no clause pricing that outcome. The payments are annual cash with no penalty for standing down. When asylum seekers once asked Europe's own court to review the Turkey version of this deal, the court answered it was not a legal act at all, merely a political arrangement, and declined to look. A border rented on those terms is a border with a valve in someone else's hand. 3 layers, 3 repairs, 1 aimed at each. None is free, and each price gets read out loud. Repair 1 is for the statute, the sentence that watches the fence. Spain's parliament rewrites it. Anyone caught entering illegally in the border zone, over the wire or through the water, can be handed back on the spot. The swimmer and the climber fall under one rule, and the gap in the wording closes. The price. The new sentence applies to everyone who enters, and not everyone in that water is a storming crowd. Some of the swimmers are, say, a mother with 2 children who will ask for asylum the moment they touch sand. And for people like her, Europe's Human Rights Court has already set the rule. In 2020, it allowed instant returns at this very fence, but only for people who stormed it in force instead of using the legal doors that existed. Someone who arrives quietly and asks for protection is exactly the case the court says must get an individual hearing. So the rewritten sentence would order instant returns for the very people the court protects, and the court would likely strike it down. And the border zone has edges. Cover this beach, and the boats simply aim past it, landing further down the coast, outside the zone where the new sentence does not reach. A parliament chasing routes is always one route behind. Repair 2 is for the rumor, and it fights the rumor with speed, not with press releases. Remember the distance the false promise was built on. The fence means minutes. The ordinary procedure means months. So Spain, with European money, under the EU's new migration rules, builds enough capacity at the border to decide every case in days: screening, decision, return, or admission. If everyone who swims in August is visibly back in Morocco by September, The story tells itself, carried by the returned on the same phones the smugglers use. A rumor cannot survive a fast, visible fact. The price. Capacity size for 50,000 arrivals stands nearly empty in a normal year and costs like an airport. Decisions made in days make mistakes, and a mistake here sends a real refugee back into danger. And a center built for speed is, from the inside, a locked building. The rights problem does not disappear. It moves indoors. Repair 3 is for the rented checkpoint. Europe replaces the yearly cash with a long treaty, trade, visas, investment, and writes in one new clause. If monitors trusted by both sides confirm that a surge was organized, part of the package freezes automatically. No emergency summit, no bargaining. Opening the valve finally carries a price tag due the moment it opens, and the clause cuts both ways. If Europe withholds the visas or the money it promised, Morocco presents the bill under the same rule. The price. Somebody both countries trust has to certify that a surge was organized, and this very week shows how hard that is. Morocco has said nothing, and Spain, the very country that would be presenting the bill, has publicly denied the crisis was staged. If even the injured side will not say the word, no clause fires. A treaty on trade and visas binds all 27 EU countries for years, not just Spain, and a partner who knows its price is about to be fixed may raise that price first. A week exactly like this one is how you raise it. Every repair pays somewhere. The current design, offense-worded statute, bulletin speed truth, and rent with no penalty clause pays in weeks like this. Come back to the city of 83,000. The 57 did not die because a fence failed. The fence stood. They died on the route a statute's own wording left open, chasing a version of a court ruling that was never true, past a paid checkpoint that, on this week of all weeks, did not do what it is paid to do. Whatever you believe about migration itself, how many, from where, on what terms, that argument existed before this week and will continue after it, and this episode has not tried to settle it. But the next time a border crisis fills your screen, you now own a sharper question than how high is the fence? Ask, what does the rule actually watch, the object or the line? Who delivers the truth about the rule and at what speed? And who owns the valve on the far side? Any border where those three answers are the fence, nobody, and not us is not waiting for an accident. It has one scheduled.